Robert Moss is the creator of Active Dreaming, an original synthesis of modern dreamwork and shamanism. He's a best-selling author whose books include Conscious Dreaming, Dreaming the Soul Back Home, and Growing Big Dreams, Manifesting Your Heart's Desires Through 12 Secrets of Imagination. He leads many popular online courses for the Shift Network, and he's here with us today. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
No, it's good to be dreaming with you, Lisa, and this is such an important theme right now. I'm delighted to be able to contribute.
Absolutely, and I am so glad to have the opportunity to talk to you about this on this subject, because I've always wanted to ask you about this. We usually talk about dream work, but you wrote a memoir titled The Boy Who Died and Came Back. So if you don't mind, let's start there. What happened when you were a boy?
All right, well, let me tell a bit of the story. So I'm 3 years old, and my mother says, let's go to West Australia to meet her family, who are Irish Australians living on the West Coast. Okay, this is a long, long train trip. I'm 3 years old. We go to see my mother's aunt, a famous opera singer, and a very, very effective psychic medium. She does it on the quiet, but she reads for important people. And she's doing the tea leaves the old-fashioned way, you know. And she looks at my tea leaves, she turns white, leaves the room, and will not speak to us for a while afterwards. She saw my death. And I died that winter, in a very cruel winter in Tasmania, with my father, an army officer, was posted at the time, and I was pronounced clinically dead. The doctors, when I revived, said with some embarrassment, "Oh, your boy died and he came back, didn't he?" So that's where the title of my memoir came from. And that's the way I've always thought of these things. Now, I can't tell you anything much about what happened when I was out of my body, pronounced dead at age 3. I can tell you a lot more about what happened afterwards. I do know that after that experience, that close encounter with death, that actually was a temporary death. I wouldn't call it a near-death experience. I was pronounced dead, and I was, to all intents and purposes, dead for a while. I can't tell you what happened during that out-of-the-body episode, but I know that in the body for a long time afterwards, I found it rather hard to operate in this earth. I felt as if I'd just fallen from outer space, fallen out of the sky. I felt the body was strange and alien. I got sick all the time. Then the big experience I can talk about, which really prepared me for everything that I do now, came when I was 9. I said to my father in Australian slang, "Oh, Dad, I feel a bit crook," meaning I don't feel too well. They rushed me to the hospital immediately because I had so much pain and sickness. I never really complained. When I did complain, they listened. So we're there. My appendix is about to blow up. They rush me to the operating room, emergency appendectomy, and I leave my body again, and I'm pronounced clinically dead again. And I remember vividly many phases of what happened. And this is the story I'll share briefly because it helps to orient us on everything. So it starts out like a typical NDE experience we hear today. I'm out of my body, I'm somewhere under the ceiling, right? I'm looking at the surgery, it's messy. I'm listening to the voices of the nurses and doctors. I don't want to be there. So I go out of the operating room, leaving the body on the table, and there's my mother weeping. And I don't want to stay around because I'm an only child and I feel guilty that my mother is grieving. So I go down the corridor looking for something to do, and I look out the window. It's a nice sunny day, there's the beach. There's the theme park down the beach, Luna Park, just for fun. It's a popular Australian theme park. And the gate of Luna Park is a big round moon face, and the open moon mouth is the way you get into the park. And I want to do what a 9-year-old kid would do. Go to the park, get on the rides, look at the girls in their summer dresses, have some fun. So I'm at Luna Park now, completely forgotten my body's under the surgeon's scalpel. I go through the mouth of the moon gate, and suddenly, whoops, I don't know, I'm on the ghost train or something or other. It's dark, it's all moving very fast, and suddenly I'm in a different landscape. It's beautiful. I don't recognize, I can't name many of the flowers and trees, but then in Australia, many of the flowers and trees are very exotic anyway. The people are very beautiful. They're very tall, they're very elongated, they're very charming, they're very elegant, they're radiant. They seem like teachers, they seem like healers, and they receive me as one of their own. And I start living with them. They raise me. I'm living a whole life. They raised me, they trained me to be a teacher and healer of their tradition. I become a father, a grandfather. I'm living a whole life, and it's beautiful. And then suddenly it's time to leave that body, and I think, oh, well, I'm going to the home star now, aren't I? And suddenly, bang, whoopsie, I'm back in the body of a 9-year-old kid, coming out, coming back. in a hospital bed in Melbourne, in St Andrew's Hospital in Melbourne, Australia. And I remember this time. I mean, I remember all this, and I'm excited when as I begin to talk. I'm confused, but as I begin to talk about it, everybody around me is sympathetic, but they're incredulous. What's he talking about? The doctor said, it must be the medication. He must be hallucinating. My parents are really good people. They're really nice people. They really tried to protect me and get me through, but they have no way of understanding this kind of thing. So I now have a burden. I feel I've lived a whole life somewhere else. This is beyond an NDE in the normal sense. I feel I died and came back, and in the 9 minutes I was considered to be clinically dead. I lived a whole life among other people, wise people, deep people, intelligent people, civilized people, teachers and healers. Who can I talk to about this? You know, I'm an army brat. I've just arrived at a new school. I don't have close friends, and, you know, I'm going to be laughed at if I talk about it. The only person I could find for a while who'd listen to this kind of thing and validate and confirm it for me was an Aboriginal kid from the First Peoples, from the Indigenous tradition. And I wasn't supposed to hang out with people like that because people were reflexively racist back then. It was white Australia time. I mean, people didn't understand they were racist, but they were. But anyway, Jacko, my Aboriginal friend, he'd say, oh yeah, he didn't get excited about this kind of story. Oh yeah, we do that. You know, we get real sick. We go and we live with the spirits, don't we? And when we come back, we're sometimes the same and sometimes not. And my uncle, he says, the artist, the good paintings, the ones that are not for the tourists, he gets his paintings that way. He goes into the dream time. He goes to the spirit world and he brings his paintings back from there. So getting some measure of validation and encouragement from someone from an indigenous dreaming tradition, a very old tradition. But this dreaming is for real. And Lisa, there's a gift in every challenge, a gift in every wound. The gift of that experience and my generally sickly and difficult childhood, I was in sick beds again and again and again, double pneumonia in both lungs 12 times over 8 years. Then suddenly it stopped and I came back and I was pretty strong and didn't have serious physical challenges since. But the gift of that strange childhood was a familiarity with worlds of dream and imagination that to me have always been entirely real, not less real than ordinary reality, sometimes more real, sources of knowledge, sources of depth understanding, sources of initiation and healing. I've understood it's not weird, it's not strange to travel amongst the so-called dead who are alive somewhere else. I've done that all of my life. I've understood it's not difficult to be able to see across space and time, particularly in dreaming. I've understood that the dream world is a real world where there are places of initiation, training, healing, education, entertainment available to us if we open to the dreaming. And as life went on, I realized you don't have to go through the extremity of an NDE in order to get to these places. You can learn to do it safely. You can learn to do it through following the path of your dreams in particular. By the way, in the Tibetan language, there is a word for someone who dies and comes back. One word, delog, D-E-L-O-G, delog. It would be useful to have a word like this in English. It means literally one who dies and comes back. Doesn't make you a saint, doesn't make you a lama, doesn't make you necessarily a particularly spiritually evolved person, but it does mean that you know about the geography and the transitions and the possibilities of life beyond the physical world. And that's an important thing right now, and indeed at any time, for us to know more about, because none of us know where death is waiting for us, so we better be prepared to meet death everywhere, as a great French essayist Montaigne once wrote. And we're surrounded by death in this strange era we're in. We know people who are dying. We know people who need to be prepared and ready. We know people who would like to have some assurance, some confidence that there are roadmaps and there are, you know, ways of understanding the territory of death and life and rebirth beyond the obvious. And dreaming is the way that you get that kind of knowledge. So that's where my really first initiation in this life into all of this, into the dreaming, into understanding what happens beyond death, begins. And it gave me no theology, but it gave me one deep conviction founded on experience. So it's more than belief. It's an understanding based on first-hand experience. And the understanding is this, Lisa. Consciousness survives the death of the body. I have no doubt about it. I've known that since I was a boy. And I've noticed in life there's sometimes a rather large difference between people who understand through first-hand experience that your story doesn't end with physical death. It goes on. It doesn't begin with coming into the world at birth. You had a life before you came here. If you understand that this life is a bridge between different worlds, a transition between different worlds, then maybe you'll be equipped to make clearer choices. Maybe you'll even bring a little sense of humor, a little sense of the divine comedy into the game of life from time to time, understanding that this is not the only story that we're connected to. This one life is not the only life that we're going to lead.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That was even better than expected. Thank you so much. Now, before we get back into the topic of dreaming, et cetera, and how you can use your dreams to communicate and to journey, et cetera, I want to ask you, and you may not use this vernacular, but because this is called the Beyond the Veil Summit, what do you see the veil as? What is it that keeps us from easily communicating without making
I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to answer it initially in a very specific way. I have seen the veil as a veil. When I was writing one of my books called The Dreamer's Book of the Dead, my guide through that period was the dead Irish poet William Butler Yeats. I write about this quite openly. I also raise the question, is this really the spirit of Yeats, the aspect of me who was like Yeats, the essence of Yeats? It doesn't matter, the results were very good. And he told me he was going to introduce me to a number of interesting people of his acquaintance so they could explain their after-death transitions and I could learn from them. And night after night after night, I'm in that floating state, that hypnagogic state between sleep and awake, night after night. And I see something like a gauzy muslin curtain, the veil, like an old Victorian seance parlor with the muslin veil. And one by one, the so-called dead people living somewhere else are being introduced for interviews with me to talk to me about their transitions, appear through the veil, and I'm thinking I probably look like a ghost to them. From their point of view, their side is the real side, and I'm a ghost on the side of what we consider the living. So our conversations actually took place through the veil, through the muslin veil. In a broader sense, I mean, we talk about the veil as the curtain of our ordinary perception and our ordinary understanding. So that when we talk about going through the veil, we might talk about awakening in the sense of parting the curtain, parting the screen that separates us from seeing and experiencing the larger reality. So that might be the sense in which the veil is used. But then there are necessary veils, or necessary screens, or necessary filters. You don't want to see or perceive more than you can handle. So the veil, in another sense, might be part of a filtering system that makes it, difficult initially for you to see more than you are able to deal with. I mean, if we went around, for example, seeing all the dead people who are attached to the earth plane, the streets would be very thickly populated, and we probably couldn't manage to get around, walk down the sidewalk, or get into a car, because we are literally surrounded by people who, for good, bad, or mixed reasons, are very close to the living. I mean, I'm very aware of this. And although if I wish, I can change my perception so that I can have specific encounters, I don't want it all rushing at me at once. You'd go crazy. We'd all go crazy. So as I say, the veil has meaning in all these different senses. As a curtain of perception, we need to open in order to see into the larger reality, which includes the worlds where the dead are fully alive and having lives and making choices and making transitions. But it's also part of a necessary screening system to prevent us from being overwhelmed by, let us say, psychic information or perceptions of the larger reality, which could just make us chaotic and confused and banging into things as we go around in everyday life.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.